I'm Dr. Ed Barnhart. Let's answer some questions from the internet. This is Mayan support. At Bill Wren Music asks, why did the Mayans tie boards to their babies' heads? The Maya put boards on their babies' heads to shape their skull. Babies' heads are very soft, and they put those boards on there so it would elongate towards the top. We believe that what they were trying to do is make the skull look more like a husk of corn, because the Maya, of course, were corn people. Only elite people were allowed to squeeze their babies' heads this way. And in public, a head and an adult that looked like more pointed, that meant overtly that that person was of high status. I've always thought to myself, there must have been Maya peasant people who were squeezing their kid's head on the sly and just saying, I don't know, he just grew like that. He looks like he's going places, doesn't he? At SSJ Sergio says, I appreciate the indigenous representation in Black Panther, but Kukulkan, a literal Mayan deity, taking a big L from a 19-year-old girl? Well, come on. He could have taken her. He let her go. That's what heroes really do. Kukulkan is the Maya word for Quetzalcoatl, or the feathered serpent. And his costuming was straight on. But Kukulkan was known not just for his power, but for his wisdom, his grace, and his good governance. This character was right on the money. And I can say that my Maya friends liked him very much. So he hit the mark with real Maya people as well. At Astronic asks, why did the Mayans make their calendar look like an Oreo? Right off the bat, that's not even the Mayan calendar. That's the Aztec calendar stone, also called the Aztec cosmology stone. The Maya also had that 260-day calendar that we see on the Aztec calendar Oreo. Now you might be wondering, why 260 days? 260 days is 9 months. It's the human gestation period. It's our first cycle from conception to birth. No other civilization on the planet did this, and I think it's a particularly beautiful and unique to humans cycle. The Maya did make the most elaborate calendar system in the ancient world. They used typically 5 different cycles just to tell you what day it is. They tell us the lunar cycle. They were definitely obsessed with time. One of the original archaeologists in the area, J. Eric Thompson, said they're just esoteric time worshippers because clearly the texts were mostly about cycles of time. At Nick Bloom asks, what was the first ever clothing trend? Maybe Mayan sandals. I bet those shits were hot back in the day. Well, they did make some pretty cool sandals, it's true. We can see them on ceramic vessels like this. This guy right here, they've got this nice treatment on the top. His whole wardrobe is great. He's got a jade skirt. It's got this hatch pattern. They wear tunics. The Maya had style. At Superpower Armor asks, anyone else pissed that the Mayans were wrong and the world didn't end in 2012? Not me personally. I like still being here. It turns out that the Maya are talking about a start day of their calendar at the year 3114 BC, specifically August 13th. They say it's the last day of the third creation and the beginning of the fourth creation. So if we do the math, and like the odometer in your car, the last time the calendar switched and reset, we move our odometer forward from 3114 BC and we get to the year 2012, specifically December 21st. That's where we get that 2012 thing. For people like myself that pore through texts related to the Maya calendar, there are a few key texts that make it clear it's not going to be in 2012. It's going to be in the year 4772. At Tiger Woods Sucks asks, how are the Maya and the Aztecs alike? Well, the Maya and the Aztec do share a lot of similarities. The Aztecs were an empire. The Maya were independent city-states. The Aztecs were very much focused on conquest, warfare, and sacrifice. The Maya really didn't do that much sacrificing. They did auto-sacrificing. The kings would actually bloodlet themselves in public public as an act of protection of the people and to please the gods. At Dogs Move Silent asks, what did the Maya do for fun? They had a sport they adored. We just call it the Maya ball game. Some people call it polka toke. We can thank the Maya for making rubber, but they didn't make it for elastic in their underwear. They made it to play the game. They made balls just like this. I made this ball out of the latex from rubber trees and the sulfur from morning glory seeds. They would use balls much bigger than this, and they built actual sports courts. From above, they kind of look like a capital I. So they had a lane running down the middle of them, and there was a center line and then two out of bounds places. And teams would face off at the center line and bounce these hard kind of giant super balls up on a sloping wall back and forth, kind of like tennis goes or volleyball. The trick was they could not touch it with their hands or their feet. They had to use their hips or their chest. Some versions of the ball court also had rings on either side. And if you get it through the ring, that's it, game over. So 3,500 years ago is when this game began. By the time they got to the Aztecs, each Aztec city had their own football team, like the Chiefs or the Dallas Cowboys. Sometimes when two cities were arguing, instead of going to war, they could settle it through a ball game. They had big crowds that would watch, and especially rich people would be able to sit up close, and it was their job to throw out things like treasures, jewelry, things that were gifts to the winning team. If a rich person tried to sneak out just before the game ended, the team had the right to run them down, tackle them, and take their jewelry off of them. It's not true that the winners of the Maya ball game were sacrificed. You'd have a pretty hard time coming up with good players. At Terrace West asks, so who got sacrificed to the Mayan gods? It was mostly people that were warriors captured in some sort of ceremonial battle. They'd go to these little wars that were kind of elites against elites. They'd stab them in the leg and they'd drag them back to sacrifice them up on top of a temple. The Aztecs sacrificed almost anybody. At MDV Nasser asks, did a young schoolboy really find a lost Mayan city or just a field? A boy in Canada, about 16 years old, was using maps and Maya codices, and he identified what he believed to be a Maya city. Now, in that case, it was not actually what he believed it to be, but there is real potential for finding Maya cities. And with now the advent of LiDAR, wow, we are finding them faster than ever. Google Earth gets refreshed all the time. And as people move out into these jungle areas and cut down the trees, all of a sudden they reveal these temples. What I tend to look for are irregular or unnatural geometric shapes or arrangements. Maya pyramids are usually arranged in groups around plazas. So if you see a hill with a square in front of it and two other square hills around it, that's a good chance that that's actually man-made. The city I found in Belize, which I named Mashna, was back in the 1990s, so I didn't have the pleasure of all of this great new technology. I used a topography map, looked at the area, and said to myself, if I was a Maya, where would I want to live? So I looked for the tallest mountain in the area. When I found that, I saw two little mountains right next to it, and I said, right off the bat, in my apartment in Austin, Texas, if I was a Maya, I would build a city there. And 2 years later, after hacking out there with a crew and machetes, I was right. There I was, standing on top of a 70-foot tall pyramid, looking down into a plaza with a ball court. It was something that I really just didn't ever think was going to happen to me, because I was only 25, and this was supposed to be my life goal. In some ways, I stood on top of that temple and said, well, God, what am I going to do now? At Wayward Jim asks, so for at least the Mayans, money really did grow on trees. You're referring to cacao, of course, chocolate beans. And yes, the Maya did use them as at least standard in their barter system. They're easy to dry and transport, they're small. By the time the Aztecs were using it as a currency, there was also a counterfeit ring. There were people that were making little seeds out of ceramics and making them look like they were chocolate beans when really they were counterfeit. And there were Aztec police who would walk around the market looking for counterfeiters and bust them with their ceramic beans. Chocolate was the drink of the elite. It was a pleasure. It was something that they frothed up, they put chili pepper in it, never sugar. It was a spicy drink. It was only grown in the Maya area. It was something about that tropical forest that allowed cacao, chocolate to grow. At Osle Wamua asks, timeline period for Mayan civilization? You could actually take it back to 10,000 years, but something that we pretty much all conservatively agree would be 2,000 years. So that really starts the Maya world. So then we get to 200 CE, its current era. That's when we really get classic Maya civilization. They start building their giant cities in the jungles of northern Guatemala. Tikal gets built. So the classic goes on for a full 400 years. We have dynasties of kings. We have fully elaborated hieroglyphs and them telling us their history, carving it into monuments. That goes on all the way to about 800 CE. And that begins a very short period we call the terminal classic, the transitional. Everybody's moving around, cities are being abandoned, new ones are starting up, but it settles out into the final period, and the post-classic period goes from about 900 all the way up to the moment of Spanish contact, somewhere around 1500, maybe even a little earlier. At JP Nijiru asks, what's the difference between Mayan and Egyptian pyramids? For one thing, the pyramid standing in Giza Plateau is the tallest pyramid on the planet. It's 150 meters tall. The tallest Maya pyramid is about 68 meters tall, so only a third of that size. For the Egyptians, they built those pyramids from the beginning, purpose-built as tombs. The Maya, the kings would use the temple in life, and then when they died, the temple would be retrofitted, dug into, and their tomb would be put inside. When it comes to who built the most pyramids, the Maya excel virtually everyone on the planet. We have seen all of the Egyptian pyramids. There's about 140 of them. We're not going to find any more. The Maya built thousands of pyramids, and there are definitely thousands more hiding under the jungle. So if one culture owns the name and the right to pyramid builder, it's the Maya, not the Egyptians. At R. King Wood asks, what tools did the Mayan use? The Maya were not a metal-using culture. None of their tools were made of metal. When it came to building things like their temples, tools were made of chert. We also call that flint. It's a harder stone, and they would shape that into axes, and those axes could cut the softer limestone into whatever shape they wanted. For finer cutting, they used obsidian. Obsidian is a volcanic glass. It never gets dull. I have taken pieces of obsidian out of an excavation and cut my finger on the glass. It lasts forever, and it's very, very sharp. At FG1133 asks, do you believe the aliens helped out the Aztecs and the Mayan Empire? No. If they did, we'd have all sorts of evidence of cooler technologies than stone and temples. I really feel like a question along those lines is just, once again, disparaging the abilities of people that were not originated in Western society. So, no, I think they did it on their own. At Android Pharaoh asks, King Pakal is an ancient alien astronaut? King Pakal's sarcophagus lid shows man tilting back surrounded by glyphs and symbols. What do you see when you look at that? Well, I definitely don't see an alien spaceship. What I see is King Pakal at his moment of death falling down the world tree into the skeletal jaws of the underworld, where he will go down and then eventually he will rise up to meet his ancestors and the gods in the sky. Pakal was the most important king in the history of the city of Palenque. He became king at the age of 12. He died at the venerable age of 80, but he brought that city back to its height. His sarcophagus is honoring the greatest king in the history of Palenque, and it is not a spaceship. At D. Perry 913 asks, in your opinion, what is the best Mayan ruin? Palenque? Palenque is definitely my favorite Maya ruin, and it's because I spent so much time there. I spent 3 years of my life making a map of the site. Anything in orange is a building that we've actually excavated or investigated. All the buildings in gray, archaeology has never touched. So you can see how little of this city we've actually excavated. There were probably less than 10,000 people living there at any one point. But despite that small population, it was the height of Maya scientific and artistic knowledge. Engineering, they made a kind of corbelled arch and a kind of cement that was stronger than anywhere else in the Maya world. One of the great buildings of this site is the palace. It has a 3-story tower. Nowhere else in the Maya world ever attempted such a tower. And in a testimony to how well they made it, it's still standing today. That city was abandoned 1,200 years ago, and yet the tower lasted through all those rainy seasons. It has not settled more than 2 centimeters in 1,000 years. At Ross Sandylands asks, did any indigenous peoples in North America have any type of writing like the Mayan people developed? Yes, there were certainly other writing scripts, especially in Mesoamerica, the Zapotecs, the Olmecs, but no one did it like the Maya. The distinguishing characteristic of Mayan writing is that it reflects the spoken word. There are actually symbols that mean sounds. This is one section of one page of one of our 4 surviving Maya books. Their writing system was one of only 4 in the entire history of the world that was an original writing system. We have Mesopotamian, which is cuneiform. We have Egyptian, Chinese script. Those are our 4. But the Maya distinguished themselves in all of the Americas as the only civilization that did it on this side of the world. Each one of these glyphs is a word, and it's broken up usually into syllables. The first symbol here that kind of looks like a comb, that's the word U. Here, these top say ma. This says ka. So they're both vowel syllable combinations. So U ma ka spells Umak, which is his burial. This is the death god. These are telling us whether it's a good day or a bad day to do something. Is it a good day to plant my corn, or is it a bad day? And this first glyph here that says Umak, his burial, that's a kind of a Maya colloquialism to say, no, it's a bad day to do that. And the bars and dots here are the different days. These are day names, and they take a long strip of bark off of a tree, and then they fold it like an accordion. Then they'll paint that with limestone paste and stucco. They open the whole thing up, and maybe a book is 10 feet long. They flip it over, and they read the whole other side, and then they accordion it up and they put it back in their bags. At Trish King 6 asks, what does Mayan sound like? We have the great benefit of having millions of Maya people still speaking their language on the planet. The biggest of those language groups is Yucatec Maya, and there are about 5 million people that speak Yucatec. If you wanted to hear a good example of it, I'd recommend the somewhat dubious movie Apocalypto. Here's some of it right here. They actually made the effort to have the actors speak actual Maya. There are a number of sounds that they'll make that have a stop at the end of it. TZ apostrophe, and that's tz. The word in Yucatec Maya for fire is kak, and that's K apostrophe A K apostrophe. One thing that Apocalypto overdid was the human sacrifice. That was really the Aztecs thing. When the Maya met the Aztec, yes, they got a little bit more into the human sacrifice, but the scenes of people being killed one after another on top of Maya temples, that's not how the Maya rolled. At Rat Lab Museum asks, how did the ancient Maya build such large cities far away from lakes or rivers? Tikal is a great example. There are no rivers near Tikal, but what they did is they quarried for all the stone they needed to build the city. The quarries became reservoirs. They lined them with stucco, so they were like giant swimming pools. The plazas between the temples, they canted them Just 1 degree. So with every rain that fell, all of those plazas funneled water into their reservoirs. Tikal kings loved to put water lilies in their headdresses. A way that the Maya have always detected whether water is fresh enough is water lilies. Water lilies are a very fragile plant. If the water is polluted, they don't grow there. So if there's water lilies on the surface, it's pure water. When I made the map of Palenque, I could see that there was a sewer system running through the neighborhoods. They crisscrossed it using gravity, probably also had makeshift toilets, getting fresh water from above and sending the gray water down below and into the larger river system, well away from the city. At its Rob Law wants to know, bro, how did the Mayans figure out the stars? Like, how? Most ancient astronomy is what we call horizon-based. A priest would stand in a single spot every night and watch what rose and set, what day it rose and set, and where along the horizon it set. If he did that again and again and again, he starts recognizing the cycles of planets, the moon, and the sun. An astronomer could spend his entire life recording cycles and then hand that data to the next generation. And after just a few generations, they got darn good at it. The ancient Maya also oriented their buildings to interact with the cycles of the sun. The most famous of those is El Castillo in Chichen Itza. Chichen Itza has this big pyramid in the middle, and it's oriented just right so that on equinox, as the sun sets, the shadow of its terraces cast onto the balustrade of one of its staircases. The shadows look like an undulating body of a snake going down the staircase. At Soft Touch 25 asks, anyone out here in X-Land understand Mayan math? I do. Yeah. The Maya had only 3 symbols. They had a dot, meaning 1. They had a bar, meaning 5, and then they had the all-important 0, like a shell for 0. But they could also use a flower. So if you wanted to write the number 7, you'd use 2 dots, 1, 1, and then a 5. Let's say we want to add the numbers 3 plus 5. So that would be 8 in the way we'd write it. But that 8 has nothing to do with the 3 and 5. But watch when you do that in Maya. If I take 3, which is 3 dots, and I add 5, which is a bar, it becomes a bar with 3 dots over it. It's this actual symbol plus this actual symbol equals the symbol for 8. The Maya managed to make a more elegant mathematical system than the one the Western world is so proud of. At Ms. Brianna asks, but where the Mayans go? The Maya are actually still here. By my count, there's about 15 million Maya still on the planet. Yes, at contact, they were persecuted, their culture in many ways ended, and 12 infectious diseases wiped out probably 90% of them. But their communities continued, and they've grown over the last 500 years. In fact, many of the Maya people live right here in the United States, at your convenience store on your corner. If that nice little Mexican woman is under the height of 5'2", she's probably a Maya. There's a big misunderstanding about the disappearance of the Maya. About 700 years earlier, when classic period Maya abandoned their cities, they moved out. They didn't die off. They didn't disappear. They weren't picked up by aliens. So those are all the questions for today. Thanks for joining me in Maya Support.